Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to FII in Space. It's to infinity and beyond, and I thank you for joining us. I'm Ollie Barrett, I'm the host of this session. And by the way, if this is your deep expertise, welcome. If you're new to space, so to speak, welcome also. And if you're tuning in online or catching up, welcome as well. Well, look, massive growth in the aviation and space industry presents so many opportunities, as you know, for investors, and we want to know what they are. And I've got three people who can tell us. The good thing about this session is we've allowed plenty of time for questions, so help us to drive those questions, please. I won't force you to say who you are or anything, but we will pepper our guests with your questions and get that conversation going. Right, next to me, a real deal investor. Delighted to be joined by Isaac Applbaum. Nice to see you, Isaac. May I call you Yitz?
Please, my friends do.
Very good. Well, welcome to Yitz Applbaum. He is the founder of Mizmar Ventures, which is a venture fund particularly investing in a whole range from mobility, fintech, cybersecurity, cloud, digital, healthcare, and space as well.
As of this morning.
Yeah, as of this. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we want your reflections on that. Thank you for joining us. Abel, very nice to see you. Abel Avalan is an entrepreneur. Seed funded his own company, so not his first rodeo. He's the founder, chairman, and CEO of AST Mobile. So think about connecting the disconnected. This is how it's done. How's he doing it? Well, over 25 years of experience in the space industry, 21 United States patents. Here's the claim to fame. They're on a mission to eliminate connectivity gaps and make broadband accessible to all. Well, we salute that mission. Thank you very much for joining us. Abel, by no means least, you might recognize Helen already. Helen Hubie has a phenomenal profile alongside our extra two guests. She runs the Exploration Company. This is absolutely fascinating, building reusable space capsules that carry goods and humans into space and onto space stations and around the Earth and to the moon as well. So background as a senior exec at companies including Airbus, and she completes our lineup. Give them all a warm welcome to FII. Thank you for being here. Now, I never like waiting too long for guest number 3 to say something. So if the panel was only 3 minutes long, and you had a minute each, and you said, listen, here's what you need to, forgive me, here's what you need to understand about investing in space. What do you say? Helen.
So I would say it's like investing in the infrastructures which are going to drive our future. If we think about connectivity, if we think about access to space, if we think about action in space or logistic in space, it's all about infrastructure. And it's like you would invest at the beginning in the telecommunication industry, in the railway industry. So it's supported by, some public investment, and it's also where private thrive, and you have the chance to be at the very beginning of the unleashment of this industry. So it's also a high-risk, high-reward profile, but there will be few winners, but the winners, they will build this infrastructure and then take a very large chunk of the business.
And if I don't have a massive check to write, do I stay away, or is there room for us to join?
There is room for, of course, everybody to join, but more, I would say, small check on the, let's say, what is called more use of the data. So, but the building of the hardware takes
of course,
hundreds of millions, sometimes billions.
And we're going to hear about your journey so far, Helen. Abel, your thought starter. Fire our minds up.
Well, I will say less connect the unconnected using space. I think the space is it had significant opportunities, but connectivity is one of the biggest ones. And connecting the unconnected it is one of the largest problems that humanity face, together with access to water, electricity, and is the way to democratize knowledge to democratize access to knowledge and information using space as the medium for it.
So that's your mission. What about investing in space? What's the thing we have to bear in mind above all other things?
Well, investment is a long journey. It's a journey where you have to plan years ahead. The barrier of entries are very, very large, very high, and it is a space where you don't have a lot of wiggle room for failure. Yeah. Even though when you innovate, you need to account for that as well.
Got it.
So investors need to be prepared for that journey. and high reward around
High
it.
risk, high reward, bearing
Yes.
in mind what Helen said. Okay, yeah, it's your starting thought for us.
Helen, I have a question. Can I
Yeah?
go in your space capsule?
Of course.
Outstanding. I just closed my first deal of the day. Everyone, please line up.
We haven't talked about a price.
Everything starts with getting the deal done, then
Good.
the price comes afterwards. So very quickly, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why SpaceX is one of the most valuable companies in the world. And someone a couple of weeks ago explained it to me really brilliantly. Think of the ocean and think of Maersk. Think of the large shipping lines. It's a multi-trillion dollar business today, and anything you can do on the ocean, there's many, many players. If you think about SpaceX, there's one group, one company that's the transport, that's the delivery mechanism, it's the logistics for space. And so for me, I think that when I think about what's the opportunity here, I just think about the ocean and ships and supply lines and logistics.
Yeah,
and I think
love
of SpaceX is 0.5% of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, well, look, I'm reading Helen Hubie's mind when she says, actually, there are going to be two companies at least, because you're a direct competitor to SpaceX. How do you explain to an investor that you can have an edge?
Actually, what we explain to investors is that if you look at, so we are, let's say, the DHL or CMA CGM of in-space logistics, right? We don't do launchers. We have to be launched, and then we bring cargo or humans to stations. What we explain to investors is that, number one, this is a very fast-growing market.
Yes.
Because it has become easier to build infrastructure in space.
Yeah.
So we have more and more space stations being built around the Earth, more space stations being built around the Moon, also bases at lunar surface. All these infrastructures, they will need food, they will need repair pieces, they will need resupply. So like the need is growing.
Yeah.
Then you look at the vehicle that can do that, exactly what you mentioned on the launcher. Very few. Only 3 nations in the world, China, Russia, United States, master that technology.
Yeah.
None in Europe. And only one player is affordable and reliable. So what we said to investors is, look, Europe will need one player. We'll be the number one in Europe.
Yes, love
and
it.
there is, of course, room for another vehicle that can be affordable and reliable. And here we want to be.
Got it. I like it. I hope you're going to be leaving those little vouchers that say we called but you were out up in space. That would be helpful for us.
No, and sorry to answer your question, a big difference is that we are launcher agnostic.
Understood.
So when
Okay.
we discuss with India and have India as a client, we launch with the India launcher.
So why don't we hear from both you and Abel, your funding journey, but more interestingly for this group, the single biggest lesson you've learned on that funding journey so far. Abel, your own seed money to start with, then what?
Well, I mean, on my journey, it has been 25 years building successful companies in space. Space mobile is unique in the sense that it's a very, very large opportunity with a relatively large investment.
Yep.
So we have invested so far around $1 billion in developing our technology, in getting to where we are today, in having the largest phase array ever launched into space, and then demonstrate the 5G capability from space directly to your phone.
Yeah.
So that had taken 7 years to get there. So you need patience, you need tenacity, you need. In my case, I was the C investor. I invested my own money. I don't have a salary. I have everything into the equity. My management team is associated to that.
Yeah.
Investors love to see that.
Got it.
They love to see the commitment. They love to see the persistence.
Yeah.
And they love to see a very, very large market.
And so you're all in as an entrepreneur. What sort of organizations have funded you so far?
Well, we have been funded basically by the largest wireless companies in the planet.
Got it.
Vodafone, 800 million subscribers on a global basis. American Tower, the largest tower company in the planet. Samsung, the largest cell phone manufacturer. Rakuten, the largest e-commerce platform.
Yeah.
And we'll be announcing also some newcomers, very, very interesting in
onwards. Now, Helen, your funding journey, and certainly a round that closed relatively recently, took a different turn. Explain what happened.
Yeah, actually we are 2 years old. We've raised more than 65 million USD today. So this makes us actually it's a record in Europe. We are the best funded, let's say, European space company in 2 years for space. No, I think what was important for the investors is, on the one hand, our roadmap was somehow made to de-risk technically our business, but also from a VC perspective, to answer their KPIs. So we have a very small capsule that we launch in Q1 next year, mid-sized capsule, which is sold out already, so we can prove commercial traction, we can prove that we deliver on time, on cost, and quality, and then we go for the final product. Yeah. So like VCs could understand, okay, hey, my client KPIs, my technical KPIs, I know what risk is, being checked when, and I understand the risk profile between seed and Series A and Series B. And also what we did, this was a bit a bet, because we had to raise our Series A in the middle of the crisis. Yeah. So we raised our Series A between July 22 and December 22. So you may remember it was Ukraine war, super high inflation. Yeah. And I proposed to my board to raise more than what we had planned. We had planned around about at the beginning 15 million. I proposed to raise 25 and we raised 40. And the reason I propose that is this risk rewards. So if we raise more, we can achieve more, we can de-risk more. So for an investor, it's super high risk, but then super high reward.
Right. So I suppose it's the challenge that these companies have got is that, bearing in mind they're urging patience amongst their investor base, they've got to show traction. And that might not be commercial traction in the early stages. So how are they going to square this circle? What are you seeing and what are you asking for as an investor?
I think two things. First of all, small wins. If you're trying to boil the ocean, it takes forever and the odds are you're not going to do it. Maybe if you're Elon Musk. That's the first thing that we very much look for. But the second thing we look for, and I think this could be a theme in general around space, is space, there's the future and there's the present. So we've invested in a number of companies where you can, from space, from a satellite, you can actually do drip irrigation on a single plant in a vineyard. Okay, so what's that technology? What's the win there? It's proving that you can do extraordinary work from space in identifying issues on the planet. So that's a very small example, but if you can do that, then you can figure out how you build on what's the present to what the future is.
Excellent. Now, why don't I just ask you, because I know you're a senior advisor to the Minister for Communication and Information Technology here in the Kingdom, something you've learned about partnering regionally, especially when government is involved?
Patience. I think that might be the first thing I would say. Secondly, enormous scale. You have to come in being patient. You have to understand that the opportunities are endless. Complexity, because there's the PIF, there's the Space Agency, there's the Space Commission. By the time you finish, there's at least 10 fingers worth of organizations. But if you do it carefully and slowly and you understand the interconnectivity, the opportunity here is enormous, the receptivity is enormous, and the intellectual capacity here to understand how important space is, I haven't seen anywhere else in the world.
Interesting. So on geography, Helen, you're about to launch in Q1 of next year. You've chosen a very particular country. Help us understand why.
Yeah, we're going to launch indeed with India. It's for us was very important. We are a European company based in Germany and France. We're opening in Italy actually this week. But for us it was very important from the start to have global partnerships. And Saudi is also, of course, on the map. India, because if you think about it, it's the fourth space power in the world. They just landed on the moon after China, Russia, and the US. And they're going to fly a human in 25, which is tomorrow. So for us, let's say, being launched with India, also having our vehicle compatible with an India launcher, opens the doors to many opportunities.
Understood. Okay. So Abel, can I draw you out on this government or regulation point? What's an example of a policy change that would help you to grow quicker and responsibly?
Right. In terms of regulation, using funds basically as a SAT funds, it is actually something completely new. The fact that you can have your phone and be wherever you are in the planet and being able to connect 5G is absolutely never been done before. We're bringing that to bear. But regulation is changing quickly. Saudi actually the regulator here has taken a very, very forward-looking statement by regulating that, advanced to many other countries, even a little bit ahead of the United States. The United States, it had a new regulation system that will allow companies like me, my company, to partner with the wireless infrastructure, but regulation is super important.
Okay, so it's important, but is there an example of a change, let's say in the United States or beyond, that you would ask for, that you think is reasonable to ask for, that would help accelerate your growth?
Well, one is uses of the spectrum, space spectrum to be used in regular devices. That will facilitate a lot of growth. It's happening. It's happening in the kingdom. It's happening in United States. It's happening in Japan. It's starting to happen very, very rapidly. Access to space that is quicker.
Yep.
And also, you mentioned SpaceX, and also making sure there's no monopolies in this industry. So that's another aspect of regulation that where it's very important that the ecosystem flourish and it flourish successfully.
Okay, Jitz, you looked intrigued by that. Did you want to come in on it?
Yeah, just less regulation. Understand the enormity that if what you're trying to do is conquer the world and really create a whole new generation of opportunity, and what you're doing at the same time is just putting in more regulation, it stunts the regulation, it stunts venture capitalists and funders from putting money in. We don't really understand the regulatory world. Let's say we're in digital and health.
Well, this is interesting. It's because when I interview AI entrepreneurs, they say regulation is the problem because there's not enough of it, and what they need is clarity. Now, that's a different example, but it's a difficult balance. Are there examples you've already come across yet that you think that has to get out the way?
Actually, yes, that you can't start building, you can't start designing, you can't start really even doing anything theoretically without crossing that gate every single time you want to do something. If you think about when you develop a fighter jet, you get to do a piece of it first, then you go back for regulation. Here, the policies are so significant that you can't even get your game started without. So that would be my change.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, we've got plenty of time for questions. So if you feel a question coming to you, it could be for the whole panel, it could be to one of them. Will you raise your hand? It could be something that's not been said yet. I see you there, and I'm just looking out across as well. We'll try and run a mic across to you. Why don't we start in the back row if that's possible? Thank you, and then we'll come forward to you, sir. There we go. Just in the back row first, if that's all right, and then we will come straight forward to you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. I think this is a very great panel. I also believe there are a lot of opportunities in terms of telecommunication. And with so many companies all launching satellite in the LEO space, how can they differentiate? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. Abel?
Let me take that. I mean, in our case, there is 5 billion phones in circulation. The fact that everyone can connect to space, that's our differentiation. Space allows you to reach every corner of the planet, but if you need a terminal or something to connect to it, that ability to be available everywhere cannot disappear. So for us, LEO is the way to get directly to the phone that you have in your pocket, is the way to open the $1 trillion cellular market that exists today, and use space to monetize on that. That's the differentiation. Of course, there's many areas where you can launch LEO satellites for Earth observation, for radar, military communications. There's many applications, but we do believe that LEO to connect cell phones is the largest opportunity that exists today in space. Simply because it's on the back that everybody carry a phone, and less people actually use computers. Everything is around the phone.
Right, now I want to get more input. Unless you're desperate to come in on this, I want to pile
Not
in
desperate, never
more.
desperate.
No. Well, let's weave them back in. But sir, welcome.
Thanks, Ollie. Question for Isaac. Jim Caravella, Off-World. For business models beyond geostationary Earth orbit, the onset of heavy reusable is likely to be a game changer, such as Starship. What is the investor appetite in terms of time frame between tangible non-fiscal milestones and the requirement of revenue-generating milestones and break-even?
I think a lot less on the latter and a lot more on the former, and I'll tell you why. Because of the enormity of the opportunity, and the model's been proven, right? It's being proven over and over. If you go to, I don't know, NASA or to Rockwell and you want to build a rocket and it's $10 billion, okay, I'm not that interested and it's going to take a long time. But if you can build me reusable rockets, and some of them fail, some of them don't, but you're getting what you need into the payload and out, I think that's, we as investors will be much more interested in time to market, speed, and worry about the profitability later, especially because there's so many ways that you can use these products. Let's start going.
Yeah, no, very clear. Helen, can I get your take on that same question? Because with another hat on, you're an investor as well. So give us the perspective.
Yeah, so, well, actually, I concur with what you said for areas where the market is not a question. The question is about the execution and the price point at the end, where exactly as you mentioned, super big rocket, very high usability. It's not about revenue generation, it's about keeping the milestones in the roadmap and keeping the cost and keeping the planning. So,
On those milestones and things you have to factor in, I just wonder, to the previous question, to what extent regulation has to be priced in as well, you know, because after all, that could be the biggest break of all. Abel, is that part of your team?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, you have, in terms of regulation, you have the regulatory aspect of how to get connectivity to devices, then you have the regulatory aspect of how to launch things, and then you have regulatory aspect of how to keep things in space. So all these things need to be concert. All these things the government have a say. I agree, less regulation the better, but there is also aspects that need to be regulated. You know, that's what regulators exist.
Yes, please, Helen.
yeah, just on the regulation, I wanted to add that if I would have a wish for the governments, for us, service contracts, much more important than subsidies. 100 million service contract, we can leverage that with debt or private investment to make it 500. Subsidy stays 100, stays 100.
So that is a really powerful message to a government. You want to support a space scale-up? Become a customer of a space scale-up.
Exactly.
And who's putting their money where their mouth is? Is that classified information?
Sorry?
Who's putting their money? Who's becoming a customer?
We are funded by private investors right now. Our first big client is actually Axiom, the first private space station in the world.
All right.
And
but on governments?
Europe shall announce normally in the 7th of November that they're going to open a competition to buy your first capsule mission. So then we have to win. But
okay, right. Well, bon chance for that. So I think I saw a question here. If that's all right at the front, feel free to say who you are. You don't have to.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Andrew Solinger from Foreign Policy Magazine. This gets back to regulation and LEO. There's a lot of satellites in orbit right now in a big rush. A lot of investors pushing after that. I think 5,000 Starlink, et cetera. And talking about governance, it's getting a little crowded up there, isn't it? And I'm a little curious how you see that playing out, if this is a mad rush, how sustainable that is. I know the Paris Peace Forum has a net zero initiative to try and instill some governance here voluntarily. Doesn't there need to be a bit more governance in the space?
So I want to answer that for 1 second.
Do.
Sorry, less than a second because it's not the right answer. But I'd like to invest in a traffic light company for space. So if anyone has that idea, I'm very interested.
Space traffic control.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity. Okay, guys.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it sounds like a lot of numbers, but I will also say space is very big. It is justifiable, it's sustainable. It depends what the end user application is. If you're launching satellites to support $1 trillion market, to connect every phone and lift people out of poverty and democratize access to knowledge and information, in our case, that's 90, 100 satellites. We see that as something that contributes to humanity, contributes to development. So there will be many of these opportunities that they probably will become redundant to each other. You know, people that provide connectivity to regular antennas and devices that's becoming crowded. But again, I think it all goes back, what aspects of space are really going to pay back? Are going to pay back big. There are some that they will be paid back very, very large. Others that don't. So that's the way we see it.
No, okay, now I'm conscious we've got 5 minutes remaining, so if there are questions, now is the moment. Because I've got a big question. Okay, I'm looking around, okay. So apart from, okay, I see another one there, thank you. Apart from your own companies, obviously, and your portfolio, what should we be getting excited about over the next few years in terms of space, things that you think will be rising in terms of interest to investors more broadly than your own work? Abel?
Well, I've been a space investor myself. So I have bought and sold companies that are in space. So far, all of them successfully. So Space Mobile is my 4th rodeo. And I say, look for the future, look what really brings a large addressable market, what management team is the first thing to look at. I mean, that's the most important of all. And then tap into opportunities that are sustainable in decades to go.
Okay, so we need a juicier tip-off than that, Abel. Give us a link that we can, are there companies you could mention, types of application that you think actually there's a lot of heat around this? Because, I've not got my pen out yet.
Yeah. Well, I will say, listen, I sold my previous company for a little bit over $500 million before my previous. And then I bought one, sold it. It was a manufacturer of space.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And great company, great opportunity. But I obviously put all my bets into one.
Yes,
and
that's
that's
true.
a space mobile.
That's true. You used to be a politician. This is brilliant evasion. So will you give us one final try? Is there a particular type of application in space that we should be looking more closely at?
Direct connectivity to your phone.
Oh my God, all right. Now, I see you there, Sarah. Unless you're going to ask that question a fourth time. We've just got time to come down to the front row. Here we go.
Hi, Ed Fraser, Trinity Group. The ISS, I understand it's being disengaged and it's going to be privately set up. Can you talk about that?
Right, so this is the International Space Station. Helen.
Perhaps I can take this question. So it's indeed planned that the ISS shall retire around about 2030. Still, technically speaking, they need to figure out how to bring it down, because you can imagine it's a huge piece to be disintegrated safely into the atmosphere, so that's a huge technical challenge in itself. But there are two main drivers today. One is privatization of in-space activities, and NASA bets that it will cost less money to have a public-private partnership and have basically private space station, serving NASA for the, let's say, institutional need, and also doing their own business in space, a mix of in-orbit, in-space manufacturing, space tourism, etc. And you have more nations willing to do things in space. India has announced recently they want to have their own space station.
Yes.
There are also discussions in other countries. So that's the drive now, to have more and more in this station, and an equilibrium between public and private.
Thank you, Helen. And yet, I just wonder, we've got serial space entrepreneurs, cadets would have been the old phrase, like Abel, but I just wonder about what you're seeing in terms of newcomers. I'm talking about entrepreneurs now to this space. It's always said outsiders reinvent industries, but easier said than done.
I think if you, at the core, to slightly answer your question of before also, I'd invest in his company, but other areas that I would also suggest, companies that are doing machine learning, AI, big data analysis. And the reason I say that's important is because you can take your knowledge from what you're doing here on the surface and go up to the sky.
Right, that is a perfect segue, because actually you'll hear from an entrepreneur, Ed Ridgway, on the next panel, e-mobility entrepreneur, now reaching into space for some very interesting problem solving. So stick around for that conversation. We've been beaten by the clock, cracking questions. Thank you. Well, I hope you'll agree with me. Brilliant panel. Yitz, Abel, Helen. Thank you very much indeed. Our journey continues with all things mobility. Thank you very much indeed.